This macrame Christmas ornament is going to be the easiest snowman you will ever make. Hi friends, let's get started. Taking your first cord, you want to fold it in half to find the center, then place that center down on your board and lay it down horizontally. This is going to be the cord that all of our work is going to hang off of. Next, grab your second cord and fold it in half to find the center again. And then with the center loop, you want to place that underneath your first cord. Then fold your loop back downwards, placing it over top of the tail ends, and then pull the tail ends through that loop. Cinch up the slack, and that is how you tie a reverse lark's head knot. Next, repeat with your remainder 3 long cords. And don't forget, if I'm ever going too fast for you, feel free to adjust the speed of this video by tapping the 3 dots on the top right corner. Alright, so you want to divide your cords in half, and then we're going to work with the first 4 cords on your left. With these 4 cords, we're going to tie a square knot. Take your leftmost cord and place it over top of the 2 centers, and then your rightmost cord goes over top of the tail of your left, behind the 2 centers, and then up through the loop on your left. Cinch up the slack all the way up to the top. This is only half of our square knot, so to complete the other half, you want to do the same thing to the other side. So this time make a loop with your rightmost cord, and then with your leftmost cord it goes behind and through the loop of your right. And that is how you tie a square knot, which is the most common knot used in macrame. Repeat the same thing to the next set of 4 cords. For our second row, we're going to join our first 2 square knots together by alternating our square knots. Remove the first 2 and the last 2 cords, and then with the 4 center cords, we're going to tie another square knot directly below our first 2. This square knot will join our first 2 knots together. Now you can bring back down those 2 cords on either side. Still alternating our square knots, what we're going to do is tie 2 square knots just like we did in the first row. So we're going to work with the first set of 4 cords and tie our square knot directly underneath our last one. As you're tying this knot, you're going to notice that there's going to be a small gap right above it. That is because we removed the first 2 and the last 2 cords on the previous row, causing a little bit of a gap. But that's okay, we're going to need that for later, so make sure that you're tying your square knots in rows and not at an angle. We're really going to need that gap in the next step. Alright, so with the next set of 4 cords, we're going to tie our second square knot in this row. Okay, and now this is the part where we're going to use that small gap. Bring down those 2 cords on either side at the top. We're going to work those into our project. Working with the top left cord, we're going to thread it right through that gap on the left-hand side. And that is how we're going to incorporate it with the rest of our cords. So repeat the same thing to the other side, threading our cord right through that gap on the left-hand side. Once you have all of your cords at the bottom, we're going to grab our 2 smaller cords and we're going to incorporate it into our project as well. So taking the first smaller cord, what I'm going to do is tie just a small overhand knot on the one side. This is optional, this is just so that I can pin it down onto my board. It just makes it a little bit easier for me to work with. This small cord is going to be our filler cord for our double half hitch knots. So take your first cord in line, which is the one that we had brought down, and tie your first double half hitch knot around your filler cord. So make a small loop with your first cord, wrap your tail end around your filler cord and in through the loop. Now for this knot, you want to make sure that it's a little bit off to the side here. And to finish our double half hitch knot, you want to repeat the same thing with the same cord. Make a loop, wrap your tail end around and through the loop. And again, make sure that this knot is off to the side. Okay, so grab your second cord in line and repeat the same thing. Make a loop, wrap it around and through the loop, and repeat one more time. We're going to tie our double half hitch knots all the way across to the end of this row. When you reach the very last cord, which was the cord that we had brought down, you want to make sure that it's also a little bit off to the side as well. And that is our first row of double half hitch knots. We're going to repeat the same process with our second strand of cord, making sure not to incorporate those two filler cords that we had added. So repeat the same process, tying 10 double half hitch knots directly underneath our first row of double half hitch knots. Great, now all the knotting for our hat is complete. Now we just need to trim our ends, leaving about a ½ inch. And make sure it is about a ½ inch because we're going to need those short tail ends in just a second. Alright, so flip it over to the back side, and what we're going to do is hot glue all of our short tail ends. So the reason why I like to have about a ½ inch of a tail end is so that I can kind of fold it over to the back. It makes the front side a little bit more seamless. And if you're using synthetic cord, you can always melt the ends instead of hot gluing it, but I'm using cotton cord, so hot glue it is. Alright, so now we're going to get out our braided cord. Now the hardest part about this is starting it. It's best to use the tiniest amount of hot glue right at the end and then fold it over onto itself. If you use too much hot glue here, it gets messy and you really don't want to see all of that hot glue. It's very visible in the center of our snowman, so less is more. Hold it down for a little while just to make sure that it's set. Then grab a tiny little bit more glue and then slowly roll it onto itself. Because braided cord is a little bit stiff and thicker than regular cord, it's a little bit tricky at first, but once you get going, it starts snowballing. No pun intended. Or was it intended? Once you've coiled it around for quite some time now, it's always good to check with the hat to make sure that it sits just the way you like it. And then you can go ahead and cut off the excess rope. Okay, so to finish up the end, you want to hit it up with a little bit more hot glue, tacking it down onto the rest of your snowman. And then to prevent it from fraying, I like to add a little bit of hot glue right at the very end, sealing it so it doesn't unravel. Now we can go ahead and hot glue our hat onto our snowman, and I like to have that end facing upwards, that way it's kind of concealed underneath our hat. Now it's time to spice up our snowman. I'm going to add a bow and this little bell on top, and the ribbon I'm using for my bow is just some ribbon I found at my local dollar store. If you wanted, you could create a scarf, but I'm going to go ahead and make a bow. So to make a bow, all you do is make a loop, like so, and then make another loop with the long tail end, and then go ahead and snip off your ribbon. And to make it a little bit neater, I'm going to go ahead and snip off a small little scrap piece that I can wrap around the center of my bow. So just hit it up with a little bit of hot glue, place your center right in the middle, and then wrap the tail ends behind your bow, trim it, and secure it again with a little bit of hot glue. Now, if you wanted to, you could add a face to your snowman with buttons or maybe some felt, but the last time I tried to put a face on a snowman, it gave me nightmares. Yeah, it did not end well. It still haunts my dreams. So my snowman is just gonna have some accessories and no face this time. I bet you're curious about what that snowman looked like, so maybe I'll leave what he looks like at the end of this video. We'll see. But I warn you, he is scary. Okay, now I'm gonna add the little bell, so I'm just gonna snip a little piece off of my garland here, and then grab these teeny tiny bells that I got at the dollar store. I'm gonna hit it up with some hot glue and glue my little sprig onto it and attach it onto his hat. All right, and then to quickly add a hanger, we're just gonna grab some scrap cord and fold it in half to find the loop. And then with that loop end, we're gonna place it right in the middle in that gap that's right at the top, right between those first two square knots. And we're gonna thread it through and tie a lark's head knot. And then tie just a regular overhand knot with the tail ends. So anyways, this is the snowman, and then on the back of his head, it's like, it's not as bad as it was, but it like, I don't know, it like was looking kind of like skull-like, and it was awful. Plus he had a nose, he had an orange nose, so it kind of looked bloody too. It was awful. It was awful. But now that it's dry, it doesn't look as scary as it did. But yeah, we won't be looking that way.